They mocked the homeless seal's dead flower farm, until his dog uncovered the secret powerful men killed for. A cold mountain rain hammered the roof of Cole Brennan's rusted pickup as the former Navy SEAL tried to sleep beside his retired K-9, Atlas. Broke, forgotten, and drowning in PTSD, Cole thought inheriting an abandoned flower farm in the Blue Ridge Mountains was just another cruel joke. But the moment Atlas started digging beneath a ruined greenhouse, armed men began watching from the woods, and Cole realized his aunt hadn't left him land. She left him a war. Comment 1 if you'd protect your family's land, no matter the cost, or 0 if you'd walk away, and tell us where you're watching from. Rain hammered the roof of the pickup truck hard enough to sound like gravel spilling from the sky. The old Ford sat crooked behind a truck stop 20 miles outside Asheville, North Carolina, half hidden beside a line of overflowing dumpsters and broken pallets soaked black with water. Rust crawled across the truck's doors like a disease. One headlight was cracked. The windshield carried a long fracture that split the glass from top to bottom like frozen lightning. Inside, Cole Brennan slept with one hand wrapped around the handle of a combat knife, tucked beneath a faded army blanket. Even asleep, he looked tense, like a man waiting for the world to attack him again. At 43, Cole still carried the broad shoulders and hard frame of a Navy SEAL, but life had worn the edges down. His dark hair was streaked heavily with gray now. The deep scar near his jaw disappeared into an unshaven beard. Exhaustion sat permanently behind his eyes, even when they were closed. Beside him, curled tightly against the passenger door, lay Atlas. The Belgian Malinois had once been one of the finest military working dogs attached to Cole's unit overseas. Age had silvered the fur around his muzzle, and an old injury made him favor his left hind leg slightly when he walked. But his ears still twitched at every unfamiliar sound. He slept lightly, just like Cole. A thunderclap rolled across the mountains. Cole jerked awake instantly. His hand tightened around the knife before his mind caught up with reality. Truck, rain, North Carolina. Not Syria, not the burning convoy, not the screams over the radio. His breathing stayed shallow for several seconds. Atlas lifted his head immediately and nudged Cole's arm with his nose. "I'm good," Cole muttered hoarsely. The dog kept staring at him. Cole exhaled slowly and rubbed a trembling hand across his face. Condensation fogged the inside of the windshield. The truck smelled faintly of wet clothes, old coffee, and dog fur. Outside, neon lights from the truck stop flickered through the rain like dying stars. It was nearly midnight. Cole checked the cheap prepaid phone, sitting on the dashboard. 3 missed calls. Unknown number. He almost ignored it. Nobody called him anymore unless they wanted money he didn't have. He leaned back against the seat and stared at the rain sliding down the windshield in crooked silver lines. 2 years earlier, his life had looked completely different. Not perfect, but solid. A house outside Virginia Beach. A wife named Andrea who still smiled when he walked into a room. Contract work training security teams after leaving the SEALs. Atlas beside him through all of it. Then came the breakdown overseas. One bad night. One flashback during a live training exercise in Jordan. One panic attack that turned violent when somebody grabbed him from behind unexpectedly. After that, the contracts disappeared fast. Then the drinking started. Then Andrea left. Then the bank took the house. Now all he owned fit inside the truck. The phone buzzed again suddenly in his hand. Unknown number. Cole stared at it. Atlas raised his head. "Probably collections," Cole muttered, but something made him answer. "Yeah?" A calm, older voice came through the speaker. "Is this Mr. Cole Brennan?" Cole hesitated. "Who's asking?" "My name is Walter Grayson. I'm an attorney in Belridge Hollow." Cole frowned slightly. The name meant nothing. "I think you got the wrong number." "I don't believe I do, Mr. Brennan. I've been trying to reach you regarding your aunt, Margaret Hale." The name hit him strangely, like hearing a ghost cough in the next room. Cole sat up straighter without realizing it. Rain drummed harder overhead. "I don't have an aunt," he said automatically. There was a pause. "Yes," the man said gently. "You do. Or you did." Cole's jaw tightened. He had not heard Margaret Hale's name in over 20 years, not since the fight. Not since his mother slammed the front door and called Margaret a bitter mountain witch who cared more about flowers than family. Cole barely remembered her clearly now. Just fragments. Cool mountain air, greenhouses glowing in morning fog, hands stained with soil, a woman with sharp eyes and quiet silences. "She passed away 3 weeks ago," Walter Grayson continued. "You were listed as next of kin in her estate documents." Cole stared blankly through the rain-covered windshield. "She left you her property." That almost made him laugh. "Property," Cole repeated tiredly. "Yes, Blackwater Flower Farm." The name stirred something old and buried deep inside him. A road winding through mountains, purple flowers moving in the wind, the smell of rain on dirt. Atlas suddenly lifted his head sharply. The dog's ears locked forward. Cole looked over slowly. Atlas was staring directly at the phone. Then the dog gave a low whine. Not fear, recognition. Cole frowned. "What is it, boy?" Atlas stood awkwardly inside the cramped truck cab and pressed closer, staring at the speaker. Walters crackled softly through the phone again. "The property is located outside Belridge Hollow, in the Blue Ridge Mountains. There are some financial complications attached to the estate, and I would strongly advise you come in person before any decisions are made." Cole rubbed his forehead. "This some kind of scam?" "No, sir." "Look, man," Cole said quietly, exhaustion creeping into his voice. "I'm sleeping behind a truck stop right now. I don't exactly have inheritance money." Walter Grayson was silent for a moment. Then he said softly, "Margaret knew that." The words landed harder than they should have. Cole swallowed. Rainwater dripped steadily through a small leak near the edge of the windshield. Atlas still stared at the phone. "She specifically asked that I contact you personally," Walter continued. "And she left instructions that I play you a recording if you refuse to come." Cole almost hung up right there. But Atlas let out another strange whine. The kind he used to make before detecting explosives overseas. Focused, alert. Cole's stomach tightened slightly. Walter cleared his throat. Then an old recording began playing through the phone speaker. Static crackled first, then a woman's voice, older, tired, but unmistakably calm. "Cole, if you're hearing this, then I suppose I finally ran out of time." Cole froze. Atlas sat down slowly beside him. Rain pounded outside the truck. "I know you probably hate me," Margaret's voice continued softly. "You have every reason to, but there are things buried at Blackwater that need to be found before the wrong people find them first." Cole's pulse slowed strangely. Something cold moved through his chest. "The farm belongs to you now," Margaret said. "And whether you realize it or not, Atlas remembers the place." Cole looked sharply at the dog. Atlas stared back at him immediately. The recording crackled. Then Margaret spoke one final sentence. "They're going to come looking for what I hid." The message ended. Only rain remained. Cole sat perfectly still. Walter Grayson's voice returned carefully. "Mr. Brennan?" Cole didn't answer immediately. Outside, a semi-truck roared onto the highway, spraying water into the darkness. Atlas climbed awkwardly across the seat and rested his head against Cole's chest. The old dog's heartbeat felt steady beneath soaked fur. Real, grounding, alive. Cole stared through the windshield toward the distant black outline of the mountains, barely visible beyond the storm. For the first time in a very long time, he felt something other than emptiness. Not hope, not yet, but curiosity. And sometimes curiosity was enough to keep a broken man moving one more day. "Where exactly is this place?" Cole asked quietly. "Far away in Belridge Hollow." Thunder rolled through the Blue Ridge Mountains. And somewhere beyond the rain and darkness, hidden beneath forgotten flowers and collapsing greenhouses, something waited for him. Something Margaret Hale had protected for decades. something powerful enough to make a dying woman call a homeless Navy SEAL home. Cole Brennan barely slept the rest of the night. Rain hammered the truck for hours while tractor trailers hissed in and out of the truck stop parking lot beyond the dumpsters. Atlas stayed awake, too, sitting upright in the passenger seat, long after the phone call ended, ears alert toward the darkness outside, as if listening for something only he could hear. By dawn, the storm had finally weakened into a cold mountain drizzle. Gray fog rolled low across the highway. Cole rubbed both hands over his face and stared at the old ignition key hanging from the steering column. "This is stupid," he muttered. Atlas looked at him immediately. Cole gave a dry laugh without humor. "Yeah, I know. Everything's stupid." The dog thumped his tail once against the torn seat. Cole leaned back and closed his eyes briefly. 20 years. That was how long it had been since he'd seen Margaret Hale. His mother hated her sister with a quiet, venomous intensity that poisoned every mention of the woman. According to family stories, Margaret had chosen her flower farm over blood. She skipped holidays, missed funerals, refused invitations. Eventually, people stopped asking. And now she was dead, leaving everything to him. It made no sense. But then again, very little in Cole's life made sense anymore. He looked down at Atlas. "You really recognized her voice?" Atlas tilted his head slightly. Cole shook his head. "Guess we're both losing it." Outside, the mountains waited behind curtains of fog. An hour later, the old Ford pickup rattled onto Interstate 40, heading west toward the Blue Ridge Mountains. The truck sounded like it might fall apart every time Cole pushed it above 60 miles an hour. The heater barely worked. Wind whistled through cracks in the doors. Atlas sat quietly beside him with his nose near the partially opened window, breathing in cold mountain air. The farther they drove, the more the landscape changed. The flat highways around Asheville slowly gave way to winding mountain roads wrapped in endless forests of pine and bare oak. Fog drifted low between the ridges like smoke rising from hidden fires. Small rivers twisted through valleys lined with old farmhouses and collapsing barns. Cole had forgotten how beautiful western North Carolina could look in winter. Or maybe he had simply stopped noticing beauty a long time ago. By midday, his phone lost signal entirely. The GPS froze, then died. "Perfect," Cole muttered. He drove another 30 minutes before spotting an old gas station crouched beside a two-lane road. The faded sign above the pumps read, "Belridge General Store." The building looked frozen somewhere in the 1970s. Rusted Coca-Cola signs hung crooked near the entrance. Wind chimes clinked softly beneath the porch roof. Cole stepped out of the truck, boots crunching over wet gravel. The cold hit hard up here, sharp and clean. Atlas jumped down beside him carefully, favoring his bad legs slightly before straightening. An old man smoking near the entrance looked up as they approached. His eyes moved first to Atlas, then to Cole, then to the truck. "You lost?" the old man asked. "Looking for Blackwater Flower Farm." The man's expression changed immediately. Not fear exactly, but discomfort. Like hearing an old story nobody liked discussing. "You kin to Margaret Hale?" Cole hesitated. "Something like that." The old man flicked ash into the wind. "Thought that place was dead. Apparently not." The man stared toward the mountains beyond the road. "A lot of folks wanted that land." Cole noticed he didn't say why. "Where is it?" The man nodded toward a narrow road disappearing into thick woods. "Take Hollow Creek Road north about 6 miles. You'll see the gate." He paused, then added quietly, "If it's still standing." Cole thanked him and headed back toward the truck. As he opened the door, the old man called after him, "Hey." Cole turned. The man nodded toward Atlas. "Dog's beautiful." Cole glanced at Atlas instinctively. "Yeah," he said softly. "He is." The road into Belridge Hollow twisted deeper into the mountains. Fog thickened around the truck. Tree branches hung low over the pavement like crooked fingers. Every few miles, Cole passed abandoned houses, slowly surrendering to the forest. Empty porches sagged beneath moss and rainwater. Rusted mailboxes leaned sideways in tall grass. The entire valley felt forgotten. Atlas became restless around mile 5. He sat upright, ears forward, nose twitching rapidly. "You smell something?" Atlas whined softly. Then the trees suddenly opened, and Cole saw it. Blackwater Flower Farm. The property stretched across the base of a mountain valley surrounded by towering forests, dark with winter rain. Long fields spread outward beneath blankets of dead weeds and overgrown brush. Skeletal greenhouse frames stood against the fog like shattered glass cathedrals. At the center sat the farmhouse, 2 stories, white paint peeling away in strips. Wide porch sagging slightly beneath years of storms. One upstairs window moved faintly in the wind. The entire place looked abandoned by time itself, yet somehow still alive. Cole slowed the truck near the rusted iron entrance gate hanging half open. A weathered wooden sign creaked softly beside it. Blackwater Flower Farm. The carved letters had almost disappeared beneath moss. Atlas stood immediately before the truck even stopped moving. The dog stared hard toward the greenhouses. Then something strange happened. Atlas let out a low sound deep in his throat. Not aggression, recognition. Cole frowned. "You've been here before?" Impossible. Atlas had come into his life overseas, during military working dog training nearly 10 years ago. Yet the dog suddenly pressed against the passenger window, with intense focus. Cole felt a chill crawl slowly across his neck. The tires crunched softly over gravel as they rolled deeper onto the property. Everywhere Cole looked, nature had swallowed the farm whole. Wild vines crawled over collapsed fences. Dead flower rows vanished beneath weeds waist-high. Broken greenhouse windows reflected pale mountain light through cracked glass. But despite the decay, there was still beauty here. Even now, rainwater clung to tangled vines like silver thread. Purple mountain fog drifted slowly across the fields. Wind moved through dead flower stalks with a sound like whispers. Cole parked near the farmhouse. The engine coughed twice before dying. Silence settled heavily around them. Atlas jumped out immediately, then froze. The dog stared toward the largest greenhouse at the edge of the property. Perfectly still, Cole followed his gaze. The greenhouse roof had partially collapsed inward years ago. Rusted metal beams stuck into the gray sky at crooked angles. One side was almost entirely covered in vines, yet something about it bothered Atlas deeply. The dog began pacing slowly, focused, uneasy. "Atlas." The dog ignored him. Cole climbed from the truck and stretched stiff muscles in his back. Cold mountain air filled his lungs sharply. For a strange moment, the place felt familiar. Not clearly, more like fragments. A porch swing moving in summer wind. A woman laughing softly somewhere nearby. Rows of black roses. Then the memory vanished. A car engine echoed suddenly down the driveway behind him. Cole turned. An old dark green Buick rolled slowly toward the house through the fog. The driver stepped out carefully. Tall, thin, gray-haired, long brown coat. The man removed his glasses and offered a tired smile. "Cole Brennan?" Cole nodded cautiously. "Walter Grayson?" "Yes." The lawyer extended his hand. Cole shook it once. Walter looked toward Atlas, who still paced near the greenhouse. "He remembers this place faster than you do." Cole narrowed his eyes slightly. "What's that supposed to mean?" Walter studied Atlas quietly. "Margaret used to say, 'Dogs remember truths people try to bury.'" Cole didn't answer. Walter motioned toward the farmhouse. "We should talk inside. There are things you need to understand." They climbed the porch steps together. The wood groaned beneath their weight. Walter unlocked the front door slowly. Dust floated through cold air inside the darkened house. The smell hit Cole immediately. Old wood, rain, faded flowers, memory. Walter stepped carefully into the entry hall. "Margaret kept this place after everyone else gave up on it," he said quietly. "Even when the taxes became impossible." "How bad is impossible?" Walter sighed. "Nearly $80,000. Cole stared at him. "You're kidding." "I wish I were." Walter removed a folder from beneath his coat. The county planned to seize the property next month. Cole laughed once in disbelief. So she left me a bankrupt ghost farm. Walter didn't smile. There's more. He handed Cole several papers. The top page carried a corporate logo. Crown Summit Holdings. They've been trying to buy this property for years, Walter explained. Developers, luxury mountain resorts, vacation communities. Cole flipped through the pages. The final offer amount sat bold across the bottom. $400,000. Cole blinked slowly. For this place? Walter nodded. They became very aggressive during the last 2 years. Why? Walter looked toward the greenhouse outside the dusty window. That, he said quietly, is the same question Margaret spent 20 years refusing to answer. Atlas suddenly barked outside. Sharp, warning. Both men turned instantly. The dog stood near the greenhouse now, body tense and rigid, staring into the woods behind the property. Cole's military instincts tightened immediately. What is it? Atlas growled low. The wind moved softly through the dead flower fields. Far beyond the greenhouse, deep near the tree line, something moved briefly between the fog and disappeared. Atlas barked again, sharp, focused. Every muscle along the dog's back tightened beneath his damp fur. Cole stepped off the porch immediately. What did you see? Atlas took several slow steps toward the greenhouse without taking his eyes off the woods. Walter Grayson remained near the doorway behind him. You armed? The lawyer asked quietly. Cole gave him a flat look. I was a SEAL for 14 years. Walter nodded once. Fair enough. Cole opened the truck door and reached beneath the seat. He pulled out a battered Glock, secured inside an old shoulder holster. The weapon showed years of wear, but looked carefully maintained. Atlas watched the woods silently, while Cole checked the magazine by instinct. The fog drifting through the valley thickened as evening settled deeper into the mountains. Shadows stretched long across the dead flower fields. Somewhere far away, thunder rolled softly through the ridges again. Cole moved toward Atlas slowly. The old military instincts came back without effort. Scan movement, check angles, watch tree lines, control breathing. Atlas advanced carefully toward the greenhouse, nose low now, tail rigid. The broken structure loomed larger the closer they approached. Bent steel frames clawed upward through curtains of vines. Rainwater dripped steadily through shattered roof panels into rows of overturned planting beds. Cole stopped near the entrance. Nothing moved. Only fog. Only wind. Still. The sensation crawling across the back of his neck refused to leave. Someone had been there. Maybe still was. Atlas suddenly darted inside. Atlas. Cole followed immediately. The greenhouse smelled of wet soil and rust, and beneath it, flowers, faint, forgotten, but still alive somewhere underneath the decay. Moonlight filtered weakly through broken ceiling panels overhead, painting pale, silver patterns across cracked concrete floors. Dead vines twisted around rusted irrigation pipes like skeletal fingers. Atlas moved deeper inside, focused. Cole swept the Glock slowly across the shadows, then froze. A metallic clang echoed suddenly somewhere farther inside the greenhouse. Cole pivoted instantly toward the sound. Nothing. Just darkness. Thunder growled outside. Atlas reached the far side of the greenhouse and began pacing around an old rusted metal planting table, partially collapsed beneath vines and debris. Then he started scratching furiously at the floor. Cole frowned. What is it? The dog whined low in his throat and scratched harder. Concrete dust scattered beneath his paws. Walter appeared carefully at the greenhouse entrance behind them. You see anybody? No. Walter's eyes narrowed slightly. But Atlas smells something. Cole crouched beside the dog. The concrete beneath the table looked different from the surrounding floor. Cleaner somehow. Less cracked, as if it had been disturbed more recently. Atlas kept scratching. Cole brushed dirt aside with his hand. Metal. There was metal underneath. A ring handle embedded in the floor. Cole stared at it. What the hell? Walter stepped closer slowly. For the first time since arriving, the old lawyer looked genuinely unsettled. I never knew that was there. Cole grabbed the rusted handle and pulled. At first nothing happened. Then the hidden panel suddenly shifted upward with a groan of old hinges. Cold air rushed out from below. Darkness yawned beneath the greenhouse floor. Atlas immediately backed away and growled softly. Not fear, warning. Cole lifted his flashlight from his jacket pocket and aimed the beam downward. Wooden stairs disappeared into a hidden underground room. Walter whispered under his breath, "Jesus Christ." The room below looked untouched by time. Cole descended slowly, boots creaking on old steps. The flashlight beam swept across shelves lining the walls. Boxes, military duffel bags, maps, stacks of journals tied carefully with faded cloth. The air smelled dry and stale, like secrets sealed underground for years. Atlas followed reluctantly behind him. The dog stayed unusually close now, ears constantly twitching toward sounds above them. Cole moved deeper inside. A folding table stood against the far wall, covered in old documents and military maps of the surrounding mountain region. Several areas were marked heavily in red ink. Coordinates, roads, tunnel routes. Cole's pulse slowed. Military shipment manifests sat stacked beside them. Dates, cargo transfers, vehicle numbers, many stamped classified. Walter descended carefully into the room behind them. "My God," he whispered. Cole picked up one of the folders. Most names meant nothing to him. Until one did. His stomach tightened instantly. Crown Summit Logistics, not Holdings. Logistics, the same company name. Just older. Much older. What exactly was Margaret involved in? Cole asked quietly. Walter removed his glasses slowly. "I honestly don't know." Atlas suddenly growled. "Low. Dangerous." Cole looked up immediately. The dog faced the staircase. Listening, then came the sound. Soft, almost invisible. A footstep. Right above them. Every nerve inside Cole fired instantly. He killed the flashlight. Darkness swallowed the underground room whole. Walter froze. Another creak echoed faintly overhead. Somebody was inside the greenhouse. Atlas moved soundlessly beside Cole. Cole drew the Glock slowly. The old combat instincts returned so naturally it almost scared him. Heartbeat slowing. Breathing controlled. Mind narrowing, no panic, only focus. Rain rattled softly overhead. Then silence. Long enough for doubt to creep in. Walter leaned closer. "You think someone followed us?" Cole raised a finger silently. "Listen." Another sound, metal scraping softly above. Atlas bared his teeth. Cole moved toward the stairs carefully. Every board beneath his boots felt thunderously loud in the dark. Halfway up, he paused. The greenhouse above sat silent again. Too silent. Cole slowly lifted his head above floor level. Flashlight beam sweeping left. Right, broken tables, vines, shattered glass. Empty. Then movement exploded suddenly near the entrance. A dark figure sprinted through the fog outside the greenhouse. Cole lunged upward instantly. "Hey!" The figure disappeared toward the woods. Cole burst outside into cold rain. Atlas charged beside him, despite the stiffness in his injured leg. Branches cracked somewhere ahead through the fog. Fast. Whoever it was knew the property well. Cole ran hard across muddy ground toward the tree line. For several seconds he caught glimpses only. Dark jacket, tall build, then nothing. The woods swallowed the figure completely. Atlas stopped abruptly near the edge of the forest. Growling, the dog refused to go farther. Cole scanned the trees. Only darkness and drifting fog. But someone had definitely been watching them. And worse, that person now knew Cole had found the hidden room. Thunder cracked overhead again. Cole looked down. Fresh footprints pressed deeply into the mud near the greenhouse. Large boots. Recent. Very recent. Walter stepped beside him slowly, breathing hard. "You recognize whoever that was?" "No." Cole stared into the woods. But they knew where to look. The lawyer looked pale now. "We should leave tonight." Cole shook his head immediately. "No." Walter blinked. Margaret hid this room for a reason. Rain dripped steadily from Cole's hair onto the muddy ground. She called me here because something scared her enough to bury military records under a greenhouse. Atlas remained fixed toward the forest, watching, waiting. Cole lowered the Glock slowly. "And whoever that was," he said quietly, "is scared I found them." Night settled fully over Blackwater flower farm an hour later. Wind pushed hard against the farmhouse windows, while distant thunder rolled endlessly through the mountains. Walter had gone home reluctantly after insisting he would return first thing in the morning. Now the farm sat silent again. Just Cole, Atlas, and the storm. The farmhouse felt colder after dark. Older, too. The wooden floors creaked softly beneath every movement, like the house itself was restless. Cole lit several oil lamps Walter had found in the kitchen cabinets. Their warm glow pushed back shadows only slightly. Atlas refused to leave the living room windows. The dog kept staring outside toward the greenhouse. Cole sat heavily in an old armchair beside the fireplace, trying to read through one of Margaret's journals. But concentration came hard tonight. His mind kept drifting, the hidden room, the footprints, the man in the woods, and beneath all of it, Margaret. The aunt he barely remembered, somehow standing in photographs at his SEAL graduation years earlier. He had found those pictures upstairs before Walter left. Margaret standing far behind the crowd near the parking lot fence, watching. Never approaching him, never speaking, just watching. A sharp crack of thunder shook the house violently. Cole flinched hard before he could stop himself. Instantly, Syria, night fire. Mortar impacts, radio screaming, smoke, blood. Cole's breathing tightened dangerously. The rain pounding the roof transformed suddenly into automatic gunfire inside his head. Another thunderclap. Closer. Atlas immediately crossed the room and shoved against Cole's knees hard enough to break the spiral. "Easy," Cole whispered shakily. But his hands trembled badly now. The walls felt too close, too loud. Too dark. His chest tightened with the familiar crushing panic he could never fully outrun. Atlas climbed halfway into his lap despite his size and pressed his head firmly beneath Cole's chin, grounding him, holding him in the present. Cole closed his eyes tightly. Rain, house, North Carolina, not Syria, not the convoy, not the dead men. Slowly, his breathing steadied. Atlas remained beside him until the shaking passed. Cole rested a tired hand against the dog's neck. "You always drag me back," he whispered. The dog's tail thumped softly once against the floor. Outside, lightning flashed across the valley. For a brief second, the greenhouse illuminated through the storm, and Cole could have sworn someone was standing inside it. Lightning vanished. Darkness swallowed the greenhouse again. Cole rose from the armchair instantly, every nerve tightening. Atlas was already moving. The Belgian Malinois stood rigid near the front window, ears forward, a low growl vibrating deep in his chest. Cole grabbed the Glock from the coffee table beside the oil lamp. Another flash of lightning split the valley white. The greenhouse stood empty, or appeared empty. Rain hammered the roof hard enough to shake dust from the ceiling beams overhead. Cole moved toward the front door carefully. Atlas stayed glued to his side. "You saw it too?" Cole whispered. The dog's growl deepened slightly. That was answer enough. Cole opened the front door slowly. Cold rain and mountain wind rushed immediately into the farmhouse. The valley outside looked ghostly beneath the storm. Fog rolled low across the dead flower fields. Bare trees bent in the wind along the hillsides. The greenhouse stood nearly 200 yards away, its broken frame flashing silver beneath distant lightning. Cole stepped onto the porch. Atlas moved ahead of him into the rain without hesitation. The mud sucked at Cole's boots as they crossed the property. Rain soaked through his jacket within seconds. Thunder rolled endlessly through the mountains now, low and violent. Halfway to the greenhouse, Atlas stopped suddenly. The dog sniffed the air hard, then turned sharply toward the farmhouse. Cole followed his gaze. A black SUV sat at the far edge of the driveway. Engine running, headlights off, almost invisible in the rain. Cole's stomach tightened instantly. The vehicle had not been there 30 seconds ago. Someone inside was watching the house, watching him. Atlas barked sharply. The SUV immediately reversed backward through the fog fast. Cole started toward it instinctively, but the vehicle disappeared down the mountain road before he could make out the license plate. Only taillights glowed briefly through the rain before vanishing completely. Cole stood motionless in the middle of the field. The storm suddenly felt much colder. This was no longer curiosity, no longer strange family secrets buried in an abandoned farm. Somebody was actively monitoring the property, and they were nervous. Atlas nudged Cole's leg, drawing his attention back toward the greenhouse. The dog wanted inside. Again. Cole glanced once more toward the road. Nothing remained there except darkness and rain. "All right," he muttered. They entered the greenhouse together. The broken structure groaned softly in the wind. Rainwater dripped through shattered ceiling panes onto cracked concrete floors below. The hidden trapdoor still stood partially open beneath the rusted planting table. Atlas moved directly toward it, focused, determined. Cole descended into the underground room again, flashlight beams sweeping across shelves and boxes. The room felt different tonight, less abandoned, as though Margaret had only stepped out moments ago. The beam settled on a wall he had not fully examined earlier. Pinned across it were dozens of maps covering the Blue Ridge region. Road systems, mountain routes, property boundaries, many marked heavily in red ink. Cole stepped closer. Several names repeated across different documents: Crown Summit Logistics, Blackwater Transit, Blue Ridge Freight Authority, military routing schedules. His pulse slowed. This was organized, detailed years of work. Margaret hadn't simply hidden papers underground. She had built a case. Atlas suddenly began sniffing near a metal filing cabinet in the far corner. Cole approached carefully. The bottom drawer refused to open completely. Something jammed it. Cole crouched and tugged harder. The drawer screeched open halfway. Inside sat several cassette tapes sealed carefully inside plastic bags. Alongside them rested an old portable tape recorder. Cole stared down at them. Each tape carried handwritten labels: March 12, August 4, November 21, and one marked simply. For Cole, the room suddenly felt very small, very quiet. Rain rattled overhead. Walter Grayson's words echoed back through his mind. Margaret knew that. Cole picked up the tape labeled "For Cole" slowly. His fingers tightened around it. He hadn't heard Margaret Hale's voice in decades until the voicemail. Now her words waited underground beneath a ruined greenhouse. Atlas sat beside him silently, watching. Cole inserted the tape into the recorder. For several seconds, only static crackled through the speaker. Then came Margaret's voice, older now, warier but steady. "Cole, if you found this room, then Atlas led you here." Cole looked sharply toward the dog. Atlas tilted his head slightly at the sound of her voice. "I know that probably sounds strange," Margaret continued softly. "But that dog remembers more than you realize." Cole's chest tightened strangely. The tape hissed softly. "You need to understand something before you read the journals. The stories your mother told you about me were never true." Rain hammered harder overhead. "I never stopped loving this family," Margaret said quietly. "But after your father died, certain people began paying attention to the Brennans." Cole frowned. His father had died in a trucking accident when Cole was 19. At least that was the official story. Margaret continued, "Your father made mistakes, dangerous ones. He thought he was transporting ordinary military surplus through the mountain routes. He didn't know what was really moving through these valleys." Cole's heartbeat slowed. The maps suddenly made more sense now. "The men behind it used shell companies for years," Margaret said. "Most disappeared eventually, but one organization remained." A pause crackled through the tape. Then, "Crown Summit." Cole stared into darkness. Rainwater dripped steadily somewhere nearby. When federal investigators started asking questions, Margaret continued, people connected to the shipments began disappearing. Witnesses, drivers, accountants. Cole's jaw tightened. Atlas remained motionless beside him. I knew eventually they would come looking for anyone connected to your father, Margaret said softly, especially after you joined the Navy. Cole leaned back slowly against the shelf behind him. His breathing had become shallow without him noticing. So I pushed you away, Margaret whispered through static. Publicly, loudly. I made sure everyone believed I hated your father and wanted nothing to do with his son. Cole closed his eyes briefly. Suddenly, memories returned sharp and painful. Family arguments. His mother screaming about Margaret abandoning them. Christmas cards returned unopened. Years of silence. You were safest far away from Blackwater, Margaret continued. Far away from me. Cole rubbed a trembling hand across his face. Then Margaret said something that made his blood run cold. They watched this property for years, Cole. Atlas suddenly growled softly. Cole opened his eyes immediately. The dog stared toward the staircase, listening again. Cole muted the tape recorder instantly. Silence flooded the underground room. Then a faint sound above them. Footsteps. Not imagined this time. Real, slow, careful. Cole stood immediately and drew the Glock. Atlas moved silently beside him. Another creak overhead. Someone was inside the greenhouse again. Cole motioned toward the stairs. Atlas advanced first, low, controlled, every inch of him focused. Cole followed carefully behind, weapon raised. The storm outside had weakened slightly now, leaving only steady rainfall drumming against broken glass overhead. The greenhouse stood silent, empty. Then a flashlight beam suddenly flickered near the far entrance. Cole moved instantly. Don't move! The light vanished. A figure bolted through the greenhouse. Atlas launched forward immediately despite his stiff leg. The chase exploded through broken planting rows and hanging vines. Cole sprinted after them. The figure crashed through the greenhouse exit and disappeared into the flower fields. Male. Tall, dark raincoat. Fast. Atlas closed the distance rapidly. Then, a blinding flashlight beam burst directly into Cole's eyes from somewhere near the woods. He raised an arm instinctively. By the time his vision cleared, the figure was gone. Only darkness remained. Atlas stood near the edge of the field, growling furiously toward the trees. Cole reached him seconds later. What the hell? Then he noticed something on the muddy ground. A cigarette. Still burning faintly in the rain. Cole picked it up carefully. The label near the filter read, Crown Summit Security. His stomach turned cold. This wasn't random. This wasn't curiosity from local trespassers. Someone connected to Crown Summit was actively searching the farm. Searching for whatever Margaret hid underground. Thunder rolled softly across the valley again. Cole looked back toward the farmhouse, glowing faintly through rain and darkness. The property suddenly no longer felt abandoned. It felt occupied, watched, hunted. Atlas slowly stopped growling and looked up at Cole. The old dog's amber eyes reflected lightning briefly. Cole knelt beside him. You knew this place mattered before I did, didn't you? Atlas leaned against him silently. For the first time in years, Cole felt the old instincts returning fully. Not violence, not war, purpose. And somewhere deep beneath the greenhouse floor, buried under years of fear and silence, Margaret Hale had left him something powerful enough to make dangerous men keep coming back. Something worth protecting. Even now, rain drifted softly across Blackwater Valley by morning. The storm had passed during the night, leaving behind heavy fog clinging low across the flower fields and pine-covered ridges. Water dripped steadily from broken greenhouse beams, while cold mountain wind moved through the dead stalks with a sound like whispers. Cole Brennan had not slept. He sat at the farmhouse kitchen table beneath a dim, hanging light, surrounded by Margaret Hale's journals and stacks of old documents pulled from the underground room. Atlas lay beside the wood stove, though the dog's eyes never fully closed. Every few minutes his ears twitched toward the windows, listening, watching. Cole rubbed both hands over his face and stared at the open journal in front of him. Margaret's handwriting covered the pages in careful black ink. Precise. Controlled. Like someone constantly afraid her words might someday matter in court, or get someone killed. A truck engine echoed faintly outside. Atlas rose immediately. Cole reached automatically for the Glock resting beside his coffee mug. The truck stopped near the porch. A moment later came 3 knocks. Walter Grayson stepped inside, carrying a cardboard tray with 2 steaming coffees and a paper bag from the diner in town. "You look terrible," the lawyer said. Cole accepted the coffee silently. "I feel worse." Walter glanced toward the journals spread across the table. "You listened to the tapes." Cole nodded once. For several moments, only the crackling wood stove filled the room. Then Cole finally asked the question sitting heavy inside him. "What exactly was my father involved in?" Walter removed his coat slowly. "I wish I knew the full answer. That's not good enough anymore." Walter sighed tiredly and sat across from him. "Back in the late 90s, he began carefully. There were rumors about military shipments moving through the Blue Ridge region. Most people assumed it was ordinary freight transportation contracts. Equipment, fuel, surplus inventory. And it wasn't?" Walter hesitated. "No." Cole stared at him. "What was it?" The lawyer lowered his voice instinctively. "Weapons." The word settled heavily into the room. "Illegal exports, missing inventory, off-the-books transport routes. Most of it moved through shell companies connected to old defense contractors." Walter slid several papers across the table. Cole recognized the name immediately. Crown Summit Logistics. "The company started small," Walter explained. "Trucking contracts, freight routes, warehouse acquisitions. Then money started pouring in." Cole studied the documents. Corporate names shifted repeatedly over the years. Merged, rebranded, disappeared, reappeared, always connected somehow to Crown Summit. "My father knew?" Walter shook his head slowly. "I honestly don't believe he did." Cole looked up sharply. Walter continued. "Patrick Brennan was a driver. Reliable, quiet. He hauled freight through mountain routes because it paid well and kept food on the table. But," Walter's expression darkened, "but he eventually realized something illegal was happening." The kitchen suddenly felt colder. "He tried talking to federal investigators," Walter said quietly. 3 weeks later, he died in a highway accident. Cole leaned back slowly in the chair. The memory returned instantly. Rain, police lights, his mother screaming in the hospital hallway, a state trooper removing his hat before speaking softly to the family. Accident, brake failure. That was the story they had been told. His jaw tightened. "You think they killed him?" Walter didn't answer immediately. "Then, I think Margaret believed they did." Atlas lifted his head sharply at the sound of Margaret's name. Cole stared toward the fogged kitchen window. All these years, he had carried grief over a random tragedy. But now another possibility crawled slowly into the light. Murder. The thought made his stomach turn. Walter reached carefully into his coat pocket and removed another cassette tape. This one was hidden separately from the others. Cole took it silently. The label read, April 9. Walter nodded toward the recorder on the table. "You should hear it." Cole inserted the tape slowly. Static crackled softly. Then Margaret's voice filled the kitchen once more. "Today I saw the black sedan parked near the lower road again." Her voice sounded younger on this recording, sharper, afraid. "They know Patrick talked. I can feel it now," the tape hissed. "I told my sister we should valley immediately, but she thinks I'm overreacting." Cole's chest tightened. His mother, Margaret, continued. "They asked questions about Cole today, about where he plays, which school bus he rides." They smiled while asking. Atlas stood now, fully alert, as if even the dog understood the danger hidden inside Margaret's words. "I realized something tonight." Margaret whispered through static. They won't stop with Patrick. Anyone connected becomes leverage. Cole felt cold all over. The tape crackled again. So I made a decision. They already see me as difficult. Reclusive, bitter, good, let them. I can carry their attention if it keeps it away from Cole. Walter looked down quietly while the tape played. They think family is weakness, Margaret said softly. So, I'll become no family at all. The recording ended. Silence filled the farmhouse. Cole stared at the tape recorder without moving. All his life he had believed Margaret abandoned the family because she simply did not care. Now the truth stood in front of him, ugly and raw. She isolated herself on purpose. She sacrificed every relationship she had to keep dangerous men focused on her instead of him. Atlas crossed the kitchen slowly and rested his head against Cole's leg, grounding him again. Cole rubbed the dog's ears absent-mindedly. She let everyone hate her, he whispered. Walter nodded sadly. Margaret believed hatred was safer than grief. The words lingered heavily between them. Outside, wind moved softly through the dead flower fields. Cole suddenly stood. I need air. He stepped outside onto the porch with Atlas following close behind. Fog drifted low across the valley beneath pale gray morning light. The ruined greenhouses stood silent beyond the fields like old battlefield wreckage. Cole gripped the porch railing tightly. His breathing felt uneven again. Not panic this time. Anger, not at Margaret, at himself, at the years wasted believing lies, at all the holidays he spent cursing her name beside his mother, at the funeral he never attended when Margaret's husband died because he thought she deserved to be alone. Atlas sat beside him quietly. Cole looked down at the dog. She was protecting me the whole damn time. Atlas stared back calmly, as if he already knew. The farmhouse door creaked open behind him. Walter stepped onto the porch carrying another journal. There's more, he said carefully. Cole turned. Walter handed him the book silently. A photograph slipped loose from between the pages. Cole caught it automatically, then froze. The picture showed him in desert camouflage, standing beside Atlas overseas years earlier, taken during deployment. A photograph nobody outside his unit should have had. On the back, Margaret had written only one sentence. Still standing watch. Cole swallowed hard. Walter spoke softly behind him. She followed your entire career. Cole stared at the words. His throat tightened painfully. She subscribed to military newspapers. Read every article mentioning your unit. Called me every time there was combat overseas, asking if I'd heard anything. Cole could barely breathe suddenly. All those years, alone in these mountains, Margaret had still been watching over him. Lightning flickered faintly far beyond the ridges. Another storm building somewhere deep in the mountains. Atlas suddenly growled low. Cole looked up immediately. A dark sedan moved slowly along the far road near the property entrance. Watching the farmhouse. Watching them, the vehicle stopped briefly, then continued driving. Cole's face hardened instantly. Walter saw it too. They're getting bolder. Cole handed the photograph back carefully. No, he said quietly. He looked toward the ruined greenhouse. They're getting nervous. That afternoon, Cole returned alone to the underground room beneath the greenhouse. Dust floated through flashlight beams, while rain tapped softly overhead again. He sat at the folding table, surrounded by maps and shipment manifests, trying to piece together the web Margaret had uncovered. Atlas remained near the staircase, guarding. Cole flipped through another journal. Most entries documented names, routes, suspicious transfers. Then one paragraph caught his attention immediately. If anything happens to me, the final records are not in the greenhouse. The greenhouse is only the first layer. Cole straightened slowly. The final records. Not here. A sound interrupted his thoughts. Atlas barking outside. Sharp, urgent. Cole rushed upstairs immediately. The dog stood near the greenhouse entrance, facing the woods again. Growling hard now, Cole followed his gaze. At first, he saw nothing, then movement. A man stood partially hidden between trees near the edge of the property, watching the greenhouse, watching Cole. The stranger wore a dark jacket and baseball cap pulled low over his face. Cole started toward him instantly. The man turned and disappeared into the woods. Cole sprinted after him through wet grass and mud. Branches snapped ahead, fast, too fast. Whoever this was knew the terrain well. Atlas raced ahead despite his bad leg. Cole pushed deeper into the trees, then stopped abruptly. The man was gone, but something else waited there instead, nailed directly to a pine tree at eye level. A photograph. Cole stepped closer carefully. It showed him sleeping inside his pickup truck behind the Asheville truck stop. Taken only days ago. A message was written across the bottom in black marker. "Go home, Seal. You don't belong here." Cold silence settled through the woods. Atlas growled beside him. Cole stared at the photograph for a long moment, then slowly folded it and slid it into his jacket pocket. Fear would have been the normal response, but something else rose instead. Something old, something trained into him through years of war. Resolve. Whoever these people were, they had already decided he was a threat, and that meant Margaret had been telling the truth all along. Cold wind moved through the pine trees while Cole Brennan stood staring at the photograph nailed to the trunk. Rainwater dripped steadily from the branches overhead. The picture in his hand showed him asleep inside the truck. Behind the Asheville truck stop, Atlas curled beside him beneath the blanket. Whoever took it had been close, very close, watching him long before he ever arrived in Belridge Hollow. Atlas growled low beside him, eyes fixed deep into the woods. Cole slowly removed the hunting knife from the tree bark and slid it into his jacket pocket along with the photograph. Then he scanned the forest carefully. Silence. No movement. No voices. Just fog threading through the pines and distant thunder rolling somewhere far beyond the mountains. "They want me scared," he muttered. Atlas kept staring into the trees. Cole rested one hand against the dog's neck. "Yeah," he whispered. "Not happening." By the time they returned to the farmhouse, dusk had settled heavily across Blackwater Valley. The property looked different now. Not abandoned. Occupied. Every shadow near the greenhouses felt like a hiding place. Every gust of wind through the dead flower fields sounded almost human. Walter Grayson was waiting on the porch. The lawyer immediately noticed Cole's expression. "What happened?" Cole handed him the photograph silently. Walter's face darkened as he read the message. "They followed you all the way from Asheville," he said quietly. "Looks like it." Walter lowered his voice instinctively. "Cole, you need to understand something about Crown Summit." Cole climbed the porch slowly, while Atlas circled the yard once before following. Walter continued carefully. "Most people in this valley are terrified of them. Why? Because they own half the county already." Walter gestured toward the mountains surrounding them. "They buy farms, timberland, old homes. Anybody who refuses suddenly has inspections, lawsuits, accidents, financial pressure. Eventually, people give up and leave." Cole frowned. "And nobody stops them." Walter gave a tired laugh. "Belridge Hollow has maybe 3,000 people left. Crown Summit employs half of them." The front door creaked open behind them as mountain wind swept across the porch. Cole looked back toward the fields. "They're not just after property." Walter nodded slowly. "No, then what are they after?" The lawyer hesitated. "That's the question Margaret spent 20 years trying to answer." Inside, the farmhouse felt colder than before. Night pressed against the windows, while oil lamps cast soft golden light across dusty walls and worn furniture. The old place groaned constantly in the wind like a ship at sea. Atlas settled near the front door, but refused to fully relax. Cole spread more maps across the kitchen table. Walter pointed toward several marked locations through the valley. "These routes connect old freight tunnels built during the Cold War," he explained. "Most were abandoned decades ago, but not all of them." Walter looked at him carefully. "No." Cole leaned back in the chair slowly. The puzzle pieces were beginning to fit together now. Illegal military shipments, mountain transport routes, secret tunnels, corporate shell companies. Margaret gathering evidence for years, and now Crown Summit watching the farm 24 hours a day. Atlas suddenly lifted his head sharply. A sound echoed outside. Crunch. Cole froze instantly. Another crunch. Footsteps. Near the porch. Walter went pale. Cole motioned silently toward the lights. Walter extinguished the nearest lamp immediately. Darkness swallowed the farmhouse. Atlas stood. Low growl building. The footsteps stopped outside the front door. Rain tapped softly against the windows. Nobody moved then. 3 slow knocks. Walter stared at Cole. Cole quietly raised the Glock. "Who is it?" Walter called carefully. Silence. Another knock. Harder. Atlas barked once violently. Cole moved toward the front window and pulled the curtain aside slightly. Nobody stood on the porch. Empty. Then glass exploded suddenly in the kitchen behind them. Walter shouted in shock. Atlas lunged instantly toward the sound. A brick crashed across the floorboards. Attached to it was a folded note wrapped tightly in plastic. Cole grabbed it while Atlas raced through the house, barking furiously. The message contained only 5 words. "Sell the farm or else." Walter's hands trembled slightly. "They're escalating." Cole looked toward the shattered kitchen window. "No," he said quietly. "They're losing patience." Outside, a vehicle engine roared somewhere near the road. Cole rushed onto the porch. A black SUV sped down the driveway through darkness and rain before disappearing beyond the trees. Atlas barked furiously from the yard. Cole watched the taillights vanish. Then something shifted inside him completely. For 2 years he had drifted through life numb and disconnected, avoiding conflict, avoiding purpose, avoiding himself. But this felt familiar. A threat, a mission. People trying to intimidate him, and suddenly the broken parts inside him started aligning again. Walter stepped onto the porch slowly. "You should leave tonight." Cole shook his head immediately. "They want that. You're one man against a corporation." Cole glanced toward Atlas standing in the rain. "Not one man." Atlas walked back toward him slowly, rain dripping from his fur. Walter rubbed both hands across his face tiredly. "Margaret believed you'd stay." Cole looked toward the dark greenhouse. "She knew me better than I knew her." That night, sleep never came. Cole secured every window inside the farmhouse and checked the property twice with Atlas, despite the cold rain and darkness. The valley remained silent except for distant thunder and wind moving through dead flower stalks. At 2 in the morning, Atlas suddenly woke from beside the fireplace. The dog stood perfectly still, listening. Cole reached for the Glock immediately. Then came the sound, a generator dying outside. The farmhouse lights flickered once, twice. Then darkness swallowed the house completely. Cole moved instantly. Atlas. The dog was already at the door. Cole stepped onto the porch into freezing rain. The backup generator near the barn had been smashed apart. Fuel leaked into the mud beneath twisted metal panels. Fresh boot prints surrounded it. Atlas growled and tracked the scent immediately toward the woods. Cole followed. Rain hammered through the trees while flashlight beams bounced across wet branches and mud. The tracks moved fast through the darkness toward the old barn at the edge of the property. Then Atlas stopped abruptly. Every hair along his back stood up. Cole killed the flashlight instantly. Silence, except for rain. Then a faint metallic click somewhere ahead. Safety off. Gun. Cole dropped sideways instinctively just as a flashlight burst on inside the barn. A man stepped from shadows holding a handgun low at his side. Black rain jacket, baseball cap. Same build from the greenhouse. "Should left town seal," the man called through the rain. Cole remained hidden behind a fallen log. Atlas stayed motionless beside him. "Who sent you?" Cole shouted. The man laughed once. "You really don't know what your aunt got herself into." Lightning flashed overhead. For 1 second, Cole saw the man clearly. Mid-30s. scar above left eye, corporate security patch beneath jacket collar. The man raised the pistol slightly. Walk away while you still can. Atlas suddenly exploded forward before Cole could stop him. The Belgian Malinois slammed into the man full force inside the barn entrance. The gun discharged harmlessly into the ceiling. The man screamed as Atlas drove him backward into old farm equipment. Cole sprinted forward instantly, but another figure burst from shadows inside the barn. Second attacker, knife in hand. Cole hit him hard with a shoulder strike that sent both men crashing into wooden crates. Pain exploded through Cole's ribs as they hit the floor. The attacker swung wildly. Cole trapped the arm automatically, military training taking over completely now. One violent twist sent the knife skidding across the barn floor. But then Atlas yelped sharply. Cole turned. The first attacker had driven a blade into Atlas's side before the dog tore free. Something inside Cole snapped. He hit the second man with terrifying force. Years of combat rage surged upward all at once. The attacker staggered backward into the rain. Both men fled immediately toward the woods. Cole almost chased them. Then Atlas collapsed. Everything else disappeared instantly. Atlas! Cole dropped beside him in the mud. Blood spread dark beneath the dog's ribs. Atlas tried standing again despite the wound, still trying to protect him. Cole pressed shaking hands against the injury. No, no, no. Stay with me. Rain soaked both of them while thunder cracked violently overhead. Atlas whined softly but kept his eyes fixed on the woods, still guarding, still watching, even hurt. Cole swallowed hard. You're okay, he whispered desperately. You hear me? You're okay. Walter's truck headlights suddenly appeared racing across the property. The lawyer jumped out before the engine fully stopped. Oh my God. We need towels. Cole barked. And whiskey. Needle and thread if you've got it. Walter stared at the blood. Veterinarian. No time. Atlas trembled beneath Cole's hands. The old dog's breathing had become shallow. Cole looked down at him. The same dog who dragged him through mortar fire overseas. The same dog who woke him from nightmares night after night. The only living thing that never abandoned him. And now Atlas had bled, protecting him again. Cole's face hardened slowly. The fear was gone now, completely gone. In its place remained something colder, something focused. Whoever Crown Summit really was. Whoever Derek Voss had sent onto this property, they had just crossed a line they could never uncross. Rain poured over Blackwater Farm while Cole Brennan carried Atlas through the mud toward the farmhouse. The Belgian Malinois trembled in his arms, but never made a sound beyond shallow breaths. Blood soaked through Cole's jacket sleeve where he pressed against the knife wound beneath the dog's ribs. Walter Grayson hurried ahead, throwing the front door open. Hurry! Cole pushed inside. Warm air from the wood stove hit them immediately, but the farmhouse still felt cold with fear. Rain rattled violently against the windows while thunder rolled through the mountains overhead. Walter cleared the kitchen table in frantic motions. Cole laid Atlas down carefully. The dog tried to stand again instantly. No, Cole whispered firmly. Stay. Atlas's ears twitched toward the windows, still protecting, still listening for danger. Walter returned with towels, whiskey, thread, and an old metal medical kit that looked untouched for years. You sure you can do this? The lawyer asked nervously. Cole nodded once. I patched K9s in worse places than this. His voice sounded calm, but inside panic clawed hard against his ribs. Not Atlas. Anything but Atlas. Cole cut away fur around the wound carefully, while Walter held an oil lamp nearby. Blood welled dark against Atlas's side, but the knife had passed cleanly through muscle instead of deeper organs. Lucky, if luck still existed. Atlas winced once but stayed perfectly still beneath Cole's hands. Good boy, Cole murmured quietly. The dog's amber eyes remained fixed on him, trusting him completely. That trust hurt worse than the blood. Cole poured whiskey over the wound. Atlas jerked sharply but did not cry out. Walter looked away briefly. You two been together long? 9 years. Cole threaded the needle steadily despite the shaking in his fingers. Met him during training in Virginia. Nobody else could handle him. Atlas's tail thumped weakly once at the sound of his name. Cole swallowed hard. He bit 3 handlers before me. Walter gave a faint smile. What changed? Cole looked down at the dog. I talked to him like he was human. Outside, lightning flashed across the valley. The farmhouse windows glowed white for a brief second before darkness returned. Cole stitched carefully while memories surfaced uninvited. Atlas pulling him behind cover during mortar fire in Syria. Atlas finding explosives buried beneath roads. Atlas sleeping outside his bedroom door after the nightmares got bad. Atlas staying when everyone else eventually left. The thought twisted deep inside Cole's chest. "You're not dying on me," he whispered softly. The dog rested his head against Cole's arm. An hour later, the wound was cleaned and bandaged. Atlas finally drifted into exhausted sleep beside the wood stove. Cole sat on the floor beside him, with one hand resting lightly against the dog's neck, feeling every breath. Walter stood quietly nearby. "You should call the sheriff." Cole laughed once without humor. "And say what? Corporate security contractors broke into my farm and stabbed my dog?" Walter didn't answer, because both men already knew nothing would happen. Belridge Hollow belonged to Crown Summit. Cole stared into the fire. "I saw the man clearly tonight." Walter leaned against the kitchen counter. "You recognize him?" "No." Cole's eyes hardened, but he wasn't military. "What makes you say that?" "Too sloppy." The lawyer frowned slightly. Cole continued quietly. "A trained operator doesn't threaten people face to face unless absolutely necessary. These guys wanted intimidation, fear." Walter crossed his arms slowly. "And now?" Cole looked toward Atlas sleeping beside the stove. "Now they made it personal." The old farmhouse creaked softly in the wind. For a while, neither man spoke. Then Walter finally reached inside his coat pocket. "There's something else Margaret left for you." Cole looked up. Walter placed a weathered envelope gently onto the table. Cole's name was written across the front in faded black ink. The handwriting stopped him cold instantly. "Margaret's." Walter lowered his voice. "She told me not to give you this unless things became dangerous." Cole stared at the envelope for several long seconds. His throat tightened unexpectedly. Why didn't she just tell me the truth while she was alive? Walter looked toward the rain-covered windows. "Because she believed distance was the only thing keeping you alive." Cole opened the envelope carefully. Inside rested several folded pages and an old photograph. The picture showed Cole standing beside Atlas overseas during deployment. Both covered in dust, both exhausted, both alive. Margaret had somehow obtained it years ago. His hands trembled slightly as he unfolded the letter. "My dear Cole, if you're reading this, then the danger I feared finally found its way back to Blackwater. First, I need you to know something your heart has carried far too long. None of what happened in Syria was your fault." Cole stopped breathing for a moment. The fire crackled softly nearby. Rain whispered against the windows. Margaret's words continued beneath shaking lamplight. "You blame yourself because good men died under your command. I know that pain lives inside you every hour of every day. But surviving is not betrayal, Cole. It is responsibility." His chest tightened painfully. Nobody knew about Syria. Not really. Not beyond headlines and military reports. Not beyond the official statements that never described what losing men actually sounded like. Margaret continued. "Walter kept me informed after you returned home. He told me about the panic attacks, about the nightmares, about the drinking, about your marriage falling apart." Cole closed his eyes briefly. Shame flooded through him. He had spent years trying to bury those memories beneath anger and whiskey and silence. But Margaret had known, and somehow she had still seen him as worth saving. "You are still standing watch, Cole." Even after the war ended, the words blurred slightly through gathering tears. Atlas shifted in his sleep beside him. Cole rested one hand against the dog automatically. You think you became broken because you came home alive. But broken things can still protect people. Sometimes they protect people best of all because they understand pain. Cole swallowed hard. Another memory surfaced suddenly. Syria, night operation near Raqqa. Gunfire echoing through ruined streets. One of his men screaming over the radio. Then silence. The guilt hit him fresh every time, like reopening a wound that never fully healed. Margaret's letter continued. Atlas saved your life overseas for a reason, and perhaps God sent you both back here for another one. Outside, thunder rolled deep through the mountains again. The farmhouse felt impossibly quiet. You were never meant to disappear in the back seat of a truck, Cole Brennan. The sentence shattered something inside him. All the loneliness, all the shame, all the years spent believing he had become nothing more than a washed-up veteran nobody needed anymore. Gone in one sentence. Cole lowered the letter slowly. His face tightened. Then finally, after years of holding everything locked down, he broke, not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly. A man sitting on an old farmhouse floor beside his wounded dog, while rain fell through mountain darkness outside. Walter pretended not to notice. Cole wiped one rough hand across his eyes and let out a shaky breath. I lost 3 men that night, he said softly. Walter remained silent. Cole stared into the fire. We were supposed to extract before sunrise. Intelligence said the compound was empty except for weapons. His voice sounded distant now, like he was speaking from somewhere far away. But the intel was wrong. Atlas lifted his head weakly and rested it against Cole's leg. Cole kept talking quietly. There was a kid there, maybe 12 years old, wired with explosives. The memory clawed through him viciously. One of my guys hesitated. Cole's jaw tightened. So did I. Firelight flickered across his face. That hesitation got 3 men killed. Silence settled heavily inside the farmhouse. Walter finally spoke softly. And the boy? Cole stared into the flames for several seconds. He didn't survive either. Rain tapped gently against the windows now instead of pounding. The storm outside was weakening. But inside Cole, something else was finally surfacing after years buried beneath guilt. Grief, real grief, not rage, not numbness, just grief. Atlas pressed closer beside him. Cole rested his forehead briefly against the dog's neck. You always stayed, he whispered. The Malinois breathed softly against his arm. Walter looked toward the letter still lying open on the table. She believed this place could save you. Cole gave a tired laugh. This place nearly got us killed tonight. Walter nodded slowly. Maybe saving somebody and hurting them sometimes happen in the same place. The words lingered quietly between them. Hours passed. The fire burned low. Eventually, Walter fell asleep in an old armchair near the kitchen. But Cole remained awake beside Atlas, watching the flames, listening to the breathing of the only creature who had never stopped believing in him. Near dawn, Atlas suddenly raised his head, alert again. Cole reached instinctively for the Glock. Then he heard it too, a vehicle engine. Slowly approaching the farm road, headlights appeared through fog beyond the flower fields. One vehicle, then another. Cole stood carefully without waking Walter. The convoy stopped near the property gate. 3 black SUVs, engines idling, watching the farmhouse through early morning fog. Cole stepped closer to the window. A tall man climbed from the center vehicle. Even from this distance, authority radiated from him. Expensive coat, perfect posture, calm movements. The man removed his gloves slowly while staring directly toward the farmhouse, toward Cole, toward Blackwater. Then he smiled faintly, not friendly, certain. Atlas growled low beside him. Cole already knew, without introductions, without words. The man standing outside in the fog was Derek Voss. Cole Brennan stood motionless near the farmhouse window while dawn slowly bled pale gray light across Blackwater Valley. 3 black SUVs waited beyond the property gate like silent predators. Atlas growled low beside him, despite the pain from his wound. Walter Grayson stepped carefully into the living room, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Then he saw the vehicles and froze. "Oh no," he whispered. Cole never looked away from the man standing near the center SUV. Derek Voss looked exactly like someone who had spent his life controlling rooms the moment he entered them. Mid-50s, tall, silver at the temples, expensive charcoal coat untouched by mud despite the weather. His calmness felt more dangerous than anger. Men like him never needed to raise their voices. Cole finally turned from the window. "That him?" Walter nodded stiffly. "Yes," Atlas barked once sharply. Derek Voss looked directly toward the farmhouse, then slowly smiled. Not mockingly, patiently, like a man already convinced time belonged to him. A moment later, the SUVs backed away from the gate and disappeared down the mountain road. Just like that. No threats, no confrontation, only presence. Walter exhaled shakily. "He's sending a message." Cole stared toward the fog-covered fields. "I got it." Outside, morning settled slowly over Blackwater Farm. The storm had passed completely now, leaving behind dripping trees and silver mist hanging low across the valley. Water sparkled along shattered greenhouse glass beneath weak winter sunlight. Atlas slept most of the morning near the fireplace, while Cole cleaned the farmhouse kitchen in silence. Something inside him had changed during the night. The fear was still there. But now it moved beneath something stronger, purpose. Margaret had protected this place for decades. Now it belonged to him. And somebody powerful wanted it badly enough to send armed men into the woods. Walter stood near the sink, watching Cole scrub dried dust from old dishes. "You don't have to stay," the lawyer said quietly. Cole kept cleaning. "Yeah," he muttered. "I do." Walter leaned against the counter. "You realize what you're stepping into?" Cole finally looked at him. "Honestly?" Walter waited. "I think this farm might be the first honest thing left in my life." The old lawyer studied him carefully, then nodded once. By afternoon, Atlas was strong enough to limp slowly around the property. Cole stayed close beside him while they crossed the fields beneath pale, winter sunlight. The valley looked entirely different without rain, beautiful, wild, broken. Dead flower rows stretched toward the mountains, beneath blankets of weeds and frost. The greenhouses stood wounded but stubborn against the wind. Atlas stopped repeatedly near certain areas of the property, sniffing, remembering. Cole crouched beside him near the largest greenhouse. "You really know this place, somehow, don't you?" Atlas nudged his hand softly. Cole stared through broken glass panels toward distant mountains glowing blue beneath the afternoon sky. For the first time in years, the silence around him didn't feel empty. It felt alive. A pickup approached unexpectedly around midday. Old, red, one headlight held together with tape. The driver climbed out slowly, carrying 2 paper bags. An older woman in her 60s with silver hair tied beneath a knit cap. She looked toward the farmhouse nervously, then toward Atlas. "Well," she said softly, "you definitely look like Margaret's blood." Cole frowned slightly. The woman lifted the paper bags awkwardly. "I'm Rose Bennett. I own the diner in Belridge." Cole relaxed slightly. "You drove all the way out here for lunch?" Rose snorted. "Somebody has to feed stubborn men." Walter appeared from the porch looking genuinely surprised. "Rose?" She shrugged. "News travels." Atlas approached her carefully. Rose smiled immediately. "Oh, aren't you handsome?" Atlas accepted scratches behind the ears without hesitation. Cole noticed that. The dog trusted people rarely. Rose handed Cole one of the bags. "Turkey sandwiches, coffee, pie." Walter laughed quietly. "You brought pie? People make better decisions when they eat pie." Inside the farmhouse kitchen, warmth slowly returned for the first time since Cole arrived. Rose talked while unpacking food. About Belridge Hollow. About winters in the valley. About Margaret. "She used to bring flowers into town every Sunday morning," Rose said quietly. even after the farm started falling apart. Cole listened carefully. Nobody talked much to her, Rose admitted. Folks were scared of being connected too closely. Because of Crown Summit? Rose glanced toward the windows instinctively before answering. That company ruined families around here. Silence settled briefly. Then Rose looked directly at Cole. But Margaret never sold. Walter nodded. She could have left years ago. Rose's expression softened slightly. She used to say Blackwater wasn't just land, said it was a promise. Cole looked down at the table quietly. A promise. The words lingered in his chest. That evening, after Rose left, Cole explored farther behind the greenhouses, while Atlas limped carefully beside him. The property stretched larger than he realized. Rolling flower fields, old irrigation trenches, collapsed sheds, tree lines thick with pine and cedar. Then Atlas suddenly stopped near the farthest greenhouse. The structure leaned badly sideways beneath dead vines and shattered glass. Most of the roof had collapsed inward years earlier, yet something inside caught Cole's attention immediately. Color. Deep red. He pushed carefully through hanging vines and stepped into the ruined greenhouse and stopped. One rose bush still lived. It climbed wild through broken metal beams toward open sky above. Dark crimson blossoms spread across tangled branches despite years of neglect. The scent filled the cold air softly, sweet, earthy, alive. Cole stared in silence. Everything else around it had died. But somehow this one plant survived. Atlas sat quietly beside him. Wind moved gently through broken ceiling panels overhead. Cole reached carefully toward one bloom. The petals were almost black near the center. Beautiful, stubborn, impossible. He suddenly remembered something from childhood. Margaret, kneeling beside rows of roses while dirt stained her hands. These survive winter better than people expect, she'd once told him. At the time, he hadn't understood what she meant. Now he did. Atlas moved deeper into the greenhouse and pawed softly near an overturned gardening bench. Cole followed. Beneath scattered pots and debris rested an old metal toolbox covered in rust. Inside were gardening shears, packets of flower seeds, and a photograph. Cole picked it up carefully. Margaret stood beside a much younger version of himself in the greenhouse. He couldn't have been older than 10, both smiling, both covered in dirt. Written across the back, in faded ink, everything living fights to stay alive. Cole stared at the words for a long moment. Then something happened he hadn't felt in years, not survival, not vigilance, not fear. Peace, tiny, fragile but real. Atlas leaned gently against his leg. Cole scratched behind the dog's ears absent-mindedly while staring around the ruined greenhouse. Maybe that was why Margaret fought so hard to keep this place. Not because it was perfect, because it survived. Like her, like Atlas, like him. The sun dipped low beyond the mountains by the time Cole returned toward the farmhouse. Smoke curled from the chimney now. Walter must have restarted the fire. For the first time since arriving in Belridge Hollow, the old house looked less like a graveyard and more like home. As darkness settled across the valley, another vehicle approached the property. But this time it wasn't black SUVs. An old tow truck rattled slowly into the driveway. The driver climbed out stiffly. 70 years old at least. Heavy coat. Grease-stained hands. "Name's Frank Delaney," the old man announced. Walter laughed softly from the porch. "You brought the truck?" Frank nodded toward Cole's Ford. "Thing won't survive another mountain winter." Cole crossed his arms slightly. "I can't afford repairs." Frank shrugged. "Didn't say anything about charging." Cole blinked. "Why help me?" Frank looked out across the flower fields quietly. "Because your aunt once paid my mortgage when my wife got sick." The words hit harder than Cole expected. Frank spat tobacco into the gravel. Never told anybody. Didn't want thanks. Cole looked toward the farmhouse slowly. More pieces of Margaret kept appearing everywhere. Quiet acts. Hidden sacrifices. A woman who let the world misunderstand her while protecting people anyway. Frank nodded toward the greenhouse in the distance. She kept this valley alive longer than folks realize. Night settled fully over Blackwater Farm. But for the first time, it no longer felt haunted. Inside the farmhouse, warm light glowed through old windows while Atlas slept peacefully near the fire. And somewhere beneath the fear, the danger, and the buried secrets, Cole Brennan finally began feeling something he thought he had lost forever: belonging. The feeling frightened him almost as much as the men watching the farm, because belonging meant attachment, and attachment meant something could be taken away. Morning sunlight rolled gently across Blackwater Valley 2 days later, turning frost along the flower fields silver beneath the mountains. Smoke drifted from the farmhouse chimney, while cold wind moved softly through broken greenhouse frames. For the first time in years, Cole woke somewhere that felt still. Not safe, but still. Atlas lay beside the fireplace, wrapped in an old wool blanket, while the wound beneath his ribs slowly healed. The dog hated resting and constantly tried following Cole outside despite limping heavily. "Now, you're retired," Cole muttered while setting a bowl of food beside him. Atlas ignored the bowl completely, watching the front door instead. Cole sighed. Stubborn. The dog thumped his tail once. Outside, the valley had begun changing, not physically, emotionally. Frank Delaney arrived each morning with tools and stories about the old days before Crown Summit swallowed half the county. Rose Bennett sent food almost daily from the diner, despite Cole insisting he could manage on his own. And yesterday, a skinny teenage boy with bruised knuckles and nervous eyes appeared at the property fence, asking if anybody needed help cleaning debris. His name was Eli Turner, 16 years old, runaway. Sleeping behind the gas station in Belridge Hollow. Cole recognized the look in his eyes immediately. The same hollow survival instinct he used to see in young Marines after their first firefight. Eli worked silently all afternoon clearing brush near the greenhouses. When Rose later whispered that the boy's stepfather drank heavily and liked using his fists, Cole simply nodded. No questions, no pity, just understanding. Now, standing on the farmhouse porch with coffee steaming in his hands, Cole watched Eli helping Frank repair fencing near the lower field while morning fog drifted through the valley. For the first time in a long time, the property looked alive. Then Atlas barked sharply from inside the house. One bark, alert. Cole immediately turned. The dog stood near the back door now, despite his injury, ears forward, body tense. What is it? Atlas limped toward the woods behind the greenhouse, focused, intent. Cole grabbed his jacket. 10 minutes later, they moved slowly through the tree line behind Blackwater Farm. Atlas led carefully despite favoring his injured side. The dog stopped often to sniff the ground before continuing deeper into the forest. Cold mountain air carried the scent of pine and wet earth. Cole followed quietly. The farther they walked, the stranger the terrain became. Old stone walls appeared beneath moss and vines. Rusted metal poles stuck from the earth at odd angles. Several massive concrete slabs hid beneath years of overgrowth. Infrastructure, old infrastructure, not natural. Atlas suddenly stopped near a shallow creek running beneath an ancient wooden bridge, half collapsed with age. The dog growled softly. Cole crouched beside him. What you find? Atlas pawed at the muddy ground near the bridge supports. Cole brushed away leaves carefully. Metal. A rusted iron hatch almost completely buried beneath dirt and roots. His pulse slowed instantly. He looked around the forest carefully. Nobody, only silence. Atlas whined softly and nudged the hatch again. Cole gripped the rusted handle, pulled. At first, nothing moved. Then the hatch gave suddenly with a groan of corroded hinges. Cold air rushed upward from darkness below. Atlas stepped backward immediately. Cole aimed his flashlight downward. Stone stairs disappeared underground. The beam revealed concrete walls far below. Military construction. Old, very old. Cole stared into darkness, then muttered quietly, "Well, Margaret?" What the hell were you hiding? The tunnel smelled of wet stone and rust. Cole descended carefully while Atlas followed reluctantly behind him. Water dripped steadily somewhere ahead. The flashlight beam swept across old concrete walls reinforced with steel supports, blackened by age. The tunnel stretched deeper beneath the mountain than he expected. Then he saw the rails. Narrow freight rails embedded directly into the floor. Transportation system. His stomach tightened. Walter had mentioned Cold War tunnels earlier. This wasn't abandoned mining infrastructure. This had been built intentionally. Atlas moved ahead suddenly and barked once. Cole followed the sound around a bend and stopped cold. The tunnel opened into a massive underground chamber. Old freight crates sat stacked against the walls beneath layers of dust.
Rusted transport carts
lined one side of the room. Faded military markings remained barely visible across several containers. But that wasn't what froze him. It was the filing cabinets, dozens of them, organized meticulously. Margaret's handwriting labeled every drawer: shipments, payments, personnel, photographs. Cole stepped closer slowly. His flashlight beam shook slightly. This wasn't suspicion anymore. This was evidence. Years of evidence. Atlas sniffed near one cabinet and pawed at the bottom drawer. Cole opened it carefully. Photographs. Hundreds. Men loading military crates at night. Trucks entering hidden mountain roads. License plates. Warehouse interiors. Corporate meetings. Then one picture stopped him cold. Derek Voss, younger, standing beside uniformed military officers inside what looked like a shipping facility. The photograph was dated 15 years earlier. Cole's pulse quickened. "Jesus," Atlas suddenly growled low. Cole looked up immediately. A sound echoed faintly somewhere deeper in the tunnel. Metal scraping, not close, but real. Somebody else was underground. Cole killed the flashlight instantly. Darkness swallowed everything. Atlas pressed close beside him, silently. The sound came again. Voices this time, distant, male. Cole lowered himself carefully behind stacked crates and listened. Footsteps echoed through the tunnel system. More than one person. Approaching slowly, searching. Atlas's breathing remained perfectly controlled beside him. "Good dog," Cole reached for the Glock carefully. The tunnel amplified every sound now. Boots against concrete. Radio static. Then a voice drifted closer through darkness. "Boss," said, "Brennan's been snooping around the greenhouse." Another man answered. "Then he found this place already." Cole's jaw tightened. "They were supposed to scare him off," the first voice muttered. Derek underestimated the seal. Footsteps moved closer. Flashlights swept faintly across distant tunnel walls. Cole studied the room rapidly. No easy exits. The hatch stairs sat too exposed. Atlas stared toward the approaching lights, waiting, listening. Cole leaned close to the dog's ear. Quiet. Atlas stayed perfectly still. The men entered the chamber moments later. 2 armed security contractors. Flashlights, handguns, corporate patches beneath jackets. One moved toward the filing cabinets while the other scanned the tunnel carefully. "They're still here," the taller man muttered suddenly. Cole's muscles tightened instantly. The man crouched beside muddy footprints near the entrance. Fresh footprints, his and Atlas's. "Spread out," the second man ordered. Cole slowly tightened his grip on the Glock. Atlas's growl vibrated almost silently beside him. Flashlight beams moved closer through darkness. One more step and they would see them behind the crates. Then, Atlas exploded forward. The Malinois burst from cover with terrifying speed despite his injury. The first guard shouted in shock as Atlas slammed into him full force. Cole moved instantly. Years of SEAL training took over automatically. He hit the second guard hard before the man could raise his weapon. Both crashed violently into concrete flooring. The flashlight spun away into darkness. Gunfire erupted once deafeningly inside the tunnel ceiling. Dust rained downward. Atlas pinned the first guard against the wall, snarling inches from his throat. Cole drove his elbow into the second man's wrist until the pistol clattered away. The guard swung wildly. Cole countered brutally, fast, efficient. Years of buried combat instincts roaring back to life. The man staggered backward, bleeding from the mouth. Then, suddenly, more lights appeared deeper in the tunnel. Additional voices. More men. "Move!" Cole barked. Atlas released the first guard instantly and limped toward him. The tunnel behind them flooded suddenly with flashlight beams and shouting. Cole grabbed several folders blindly from the nearest cabinet. Then he and Atlas sprinted into darkness deeper beneath the mountain, while armed men chased them through the hidden tunnel system Margaret Hale had spent decades protecting. And somewhere far above them, Blackwater Farm waited silently beneath the winter mountains, like it had been waiting all along. Far beneath those mountains, Cole Brennan ran through darkness with Atlas limping beside him. The hidden tunnel twisted endlessly through wet stone and rusted steel supports, while flashlight beams bounced wildly behind them. "Split up! Find the dog!" Voices echoed through the underground corridors. Close. Too close. Cole's lungs burned as he shoved deeper into the tunnel system, one hand gripping the Glock while the other held the folders ripped from Margaret's filing cabinets. Atlas stumbled briefly beside him. The wound in the dog's side had reopened. Dark blood streaked across concrete behind them. Cole slowed instantly. "Easy, buddy." Atlas growled softly and kept moving, still refusing to quit. The tunnel forked ahead. Cole killed his flashlight and dragged Atlas behind a collapsed section of wall just as beams swept across the corridor behind them. The security men moved fast, professional enough to be dangerous now. One voice crackled through radio static. "Voss wants Brennan alive if possible." Another answered immediately. "What about the dog?" A pause. "Then do what you need to do." Cole's jaw tightened hard. Atlas pressed against him silently. The old Malinois trembled slightly from blood loss and exhaustion, but his ears remained alert toward the approaching footsteps. Cole crouched lower behind broken concrete. His mind raced. No clear exits, no map, no idea how large the tunnel system really was. Then Atlas suddenly nudged his arm. Cole looked down. The dog stared toward a narrow maintenance corridor almost completely hidden behind rusted pipes. Small, tight, easy to miss. Cole whispered softly, "Good catch." They slipped into the narrow passage seconds before flashlight beams swept across the main tunnel. The corridor descended sharply underground. Colder air moved through it. Water dripped steadily somewhere ahead. Cole guided Atlas carefully through darkness while distant voices faded behind them. Finally, the corridor widened into another chamber, smaller this time. Older, concrete walls cracked with age. A rusted generator sat dead in one corner beside military supply shelves long emptied. Cole leaned heavily against the wall, trying to steady his breathing. Atlas collapsed carefully beside him. The dog's breathing had become shallow again. Cole dropped to one knee immediately. "Hey." Atlas lifted his head weakly. Cole checked the wound beneath the bandages, still bleeding, not heavily, but enough. "We need out of here." The words echoed softly around the chamber. Then something caught his eye, a metal locker mounted against the far wall. The words U.S. Army Engineering Corps barely remained visible beneath rust and dust. Cole crossed the room carefully and forced the locker open. Inside rested old emergency supplies, flashlights, medical kits, and a folded tunnel blueprint sealed inside plastic. Cole spread it across the floor. His pulse quickened instantly. The tunnel system stretched beneath almost the entire valley. Multiple exits, hidden freight routes, storage chambers, and one large marked section beneath Blackwater Farm itself. Cole stared at the map. Margaret hadn't simply uncovered hidden transport routes. She had discovered an entire underground network. Atlas growled softly. Cole looked down. The dog's eyes remained fixed on something inside the locker. Cole followed his gaze. Another envelope, older, marked in Margaret's handwriting. For Cole, if they find the tunnels, Cole's throat tightened. Even here, she had prepared for him. He opened the envelope carefully. Inside waited several pages folded around a small brass key. Margaret's handwriting shook more noticeably in this letter. My dear boy, if you are reading this underground, then matters have become worse than I hoped. Cole swallowed hard and continued. The tunnels beneath Belridge Hollow were built during the Cold War for military freight transportation. Most were abandoned officially decades ago. Unofficially, men like Derek Voss continued using them long after the government looked away. Cole glanced toward the map again. Margaret continued. They move weapons through these mountains because nobody's poor valleys dying quietly. The sentence lingered heavily. Atlas rested his head against Cole's knee. I believe Crown Summit has hidden evidence of illegal arms transfers for years. Politicians, contractors, military officials, all connected. I gathered enough proof to expose them eventually. Cole looked toward the folders beside him. Then came the line that stopped him cold. I left Blackwater to you because only a soldier would understand what protecting something truly costs. Cole closed his eyes briefly. Rainwater dripped softly through cracks in the ceiling overhead, and suddenly he understood. Margaret never intended this inheritance to save him financially. This was a mission. A final watch handed from one protector to another. She chose him because she believed he would stay. Because soldiers stayed. Even when broken. Even when afraid. Atlas nudged him softly again. Cole rested one hand against the dog's neck. She knew exactly what she was doing, he whispered. The Malinois stared back calmly. Then distant voices echoed faintly through the tunnel system again. Closer now, searching methodically. Cole folded the map quickly. We move. The blueprint revealed an exit route leading toward an abandoned ranger station nearly a mile north of the farm. The path forced them through lower maintenance tunnels, half flooded with freezing water. Cole carried Atlas twice when the dog's injured leg failed beneath him. The old Malinois hated it, growled every time, still trying to walk on his own. You're impossible, Cole muttered. Atlas licked his wrist once. Hours seemed to pass underground. Sometimes the tunnel ceilings narrowed so tightly Cole had to crouch while supporting Atlas beside him. Other sections opened into vast freight chambers filled with rusted transport carts and abandoned military crates, ghost infrastructure, forgotten by the world above. At one point they passed an old American flag hanging in tatters from a concrete wall, the faded stars barely visible beneath decades of dust. Cole stopped briefly beneath it. Something about the image hit him harder than expected. A forgotten flag buried underground beside forgotten veterans and forgotten towns. Belridge Hollow suddenly made terrible sense now. Places like this became easy to exploit because powerful people assumed nobody important lived here, nobody watching, nobody fighting back. But Margaret Hale watched for decades, and now so did he. Eventually, cold daylight appeared ahead through rusted steel grating. Cole pushed the final hatch open carefully. Fresh mountain air flooded the tunnel instantly. They emerged beside the remains of an old fire lookout station, hidden deep within pine forest overlooking the valley. Snow had begun falling lightly. The world above looked peaceful, beautiful, like nothing evil could possibly exist here. Cole sat heavily against the station wall, while Atlas collapsed beside him exhausted. Below them, Blackwater Farm rested in the distance beneath drifting snowfall. Then Cole noticed something. Smoke. Thin black smoke rising near the lower greenhouse. His stomach dropped instantly. Movement surrounded the property. Multiple vehicles. Too many. Crown Summit men. Cole grabbed the binoculars hanging inside the abandoned station. The image sharpened. Derek Voss stood near the farmhouse porch, speaking calmly with armed security contractors moving across the property. Searching. Systematic. Atlas growled weakly beside him. Cole lowered the binoculars slowly. They're tearing the place apart. The realization settled heavily inside him. Derek Voss already knew the evidence existed, which meant he would never stop coming. Not now. Not after decades buried beneath these mountains. Snow drifted softly through the trees while Cole studied the valley below. Then another vehicle appeared climbing toward the farm road. Older pickup truck, Walter Grayson. Cole's chest tightened. The lawyer stepped out near the farmhouse, immediately confronting Voss. Even from this distance, Cole could see Walter shouting angrily. Voss remained perfectly calm. Then one of the security men shoved Walter hard enough to knock him against the truck. Cole stood instantly. Atlas struggled painfully to his feet beside him. The old seal stared down at the valley, at Blackwater Farm, at the property Margaret protected for decades, at the people now threatening the few good souls left inside it. Something cold and steady settled fully into place inside him. Not rage, not revenge, duty. The same feeling he carried before missions overseas. The same feeling that once made frightened young Marines trust him with their lives. Cole looked down at Atlas. "You ready for one more fight?" Atlas stood despite the pain, tail low, eyes sharp, always ready. Snow fell harder through the mountains as Cole Brennan and his wounded dog started back toward Blackwater Farm, toward Derek Voss, toward the final watch Margaret Hale left waiting for them beneath the valley. Snow fell steadily through the Blue Ridge Mountains as Cole Brennan and Atlas moved downhill through the forest overlooking Blackwater Farm. The farmhouse appeared small below them now, fragile. Warm light glowed faintly through its windows while black SUVs surrounded the property like wolves circling wounded prey. Atlas limped badly beside him. Every few steps the old Malinois staggered slightly from exhaustion and blood loss, but he never slowed willingly. Cole crouched behind a ridge overlooking the valley and raised the binoculars again. Derek Voss stood near the greenhouse, speaking calmly into a satellite phone, while security teams searched the property with flashlights. Walter Grayson sat inside his pickup truck near the barn, not restrained, but watched. Cole lowered the binoculars slowly. "They haven't found the tunnel evidence yet." Atlas growled softly. The dog's attention shifted toward movement near the lower field. 2 more SUVs climbing the road. More men arriving. Cole's jaw tightened. Voss wasn't searching anymore. He was preparing. Snow collected quietly across the dead flower rows while daylight faded behind the mountains. Atlas suddenly nudged Cole's arm. The dog stared toward the far greenhouse, then toward the woods, thinking, tracking. Even wounded, Atlas was still working. Cole rested a hand briefly against his neck. "All right, partner." He studied the property carefully. Years of SEAL operations overseas came flooding back now with terrifying clarity. Observation, movement, timing. Fear disappeared when training took over. Cole pointed toward the lower ridge. "We circle wide. Stay in the trees." Atlas moved immediately. The old dog still understood commands better than most soldiers ever had. Darkness settled fully by the time they reached the tree line behind the greenhouse. Voices drifted through the snow-covered fields. Security contractors moving methodically between buildings. One stood smoking beside the farmhouse porch. Another searched Frank Delaney's old repair shed with a flashlight. Cole stayed low beneath the trees, waiting, watching. Then Derek Voss spoke suddenly somewhere near the greenhouse. "I'm losing patience." His voice carried calmly across the valley. One of the security men answered nervously. "We searched the farmhouse twice, then search it again." Voss stepped slowly through the snow toward the ruined greenhouse. Even from a distance, his composure unsettled Cole. No anger, no panic, only control. Men like Derek Voss became dangerous because they believed consequences belonged only to other people. Voss stopped beside the greenhouse entrance. "She hid the records somewhere on this property," he said quietly, "and Brennan found them." Cole watched him carefully through darkness. Voss continued speaking while snow drifted around him. Margaret Hale wasted 20 years protecting ghosts. We are simply cleaning up unfinished business. The words turned Cole's stomach cold. Atlas growled softly beside him. Cole touched the dog's shoulder gently. Easy. Suddenly, Hetz appeared farther down the mountain road. Another vehicle approaching fast. Voss turned immediately toward the entrance gate. Cole recognized the truck at once. Frank Delaney. The old mechanic climbed out before the engine stopped fully. Behind him came Rose Bennett in her diner apron beneath a heavy winter coat. And behind them, Eli Turner. The teenager looked terrified but determined. Cole cursed softly under his breath. "What are you doing here?" Frank marched directly toward Voss without hesitation. "You get the hell off this property." Several armed men moved instantly toward the old mechanic. Voss raised one hand, calmly stopping them, then smiled faintly. "Mr. Delaney." Frank spit into the snow. "You people been poisoning this valley for 30 years. Rose stepped beside him. "Margaret protected families around here while you bought politicians." Eli remained near the truck, clutching a tire iron with white knuckles. Cole's chest tightened. These people came because of him, because of Margaret, because somebody finally stood against Crown Summit openly. Voss studied them quietly. Then his eyes shifted toward the tree line, toward Cole's hiding place. For one terrifying second, Cole thought he'd been spotted, but Voss only smiled again. "You mountain people always need sentiment for strength." Frank took one step closer. "And men like you mistake fear for respect." The valley fell silent, snow drifting softly between them. Then Voss nodded once to one of his men. Everything exploded instantly. A flare gun fired into the greenhouse roof. Fire erupted upward in violent orange light. Rose screamed. Eli stumbled backward in shock. Flames raced through dead vines and shattered wooden beams with terrifying speed. Cole surged from the trees immediately. "Move!" Atlas sprinted beside him despite the pain tearing through his injured side. Chaos consumed Blackwater Farm. Security men shouted. Snow hissed into steam against spreading fire. The greenhouse became an inferno within seconds. Frank grabbed Rose while Cole reached Eli first. "Get to the trucks!" Another flare ignited the second greenhouse. Flames leaped skyward across dry flower stalks. Voss stood calmly near the barn, watching everything burn. Atlas barked furiously, then suddenly bolted toward one of the fleeing attackers, disappearing between rows of dead flowers. "Atlas!" The dog vanished into smoke. Cole turned toward Voss instantly. "You son of a bitch!" Security contractors moved to intercept him, but Cole hit the first man hard enough to drop him into burning debris. Another swung. Cole countered automatically. Fast, brutal. Years of combat rage finally unleashed completely. Firelight flashed across snow and smoke while Blackwater Valley burned around them. Walter Grayson emerged from the farmhouse carrying boxes of documents. "They're trying to destroy everything." Cole grabbed the boxes. "Get everybody away from the fields." Flames spread rapidly now through old irrigation trenches and dead winter growth. The entire property glowed orange beneath the falling snow. Then came Atlas's bark, sharp, violent. From inside the burning greenhouse, Cole turned instantly. Through smoke and flames he saw movement. Derek Voss staggering backward while Atlas clung to his arm with terrifying force. The old Malinois had tracked him directly into the fire. "Get this damn dog off me!" One of the security men tried pulling Atlas away. Cole charged through the smoke immediately. Heat slammed into him. Burning beams cracked overhead. Atlas finally released Voss and collapsed hard against the greenhouse floor, coughing violently. Cole reached him just as another section of roof collapsed nearby in a shower of sparks. "Come on!" He lifted Atlas into his arms while smoke swallowed the structure around them. Voss stood near the exit holding his injured arm. For the first time since arriving at Blackwater, real anger crossed his face. "You have no idea what Margaret was protecting," Voss shouted through the flames. Cole stopped. Fire roared around them. Try me. Voss laughed once bitterly. She delayed everything for years, waiting for federal investigations to reopen. She thought she could expose all of us eventually. His expression darkened, but she underestimated how many powerful men needed those tunnels buried forever. The truth hit Cole like a physical blow. Margaret never protected money, never protected land. She protected timing. She spent decades waiting for the right moment to expose Crown Summit completely. And now, that moment had finally come. Sirens echoed faintly somewhere far down the mountain road. Federal vehicles. Voss heard them too. His face changed instantly. One of the security men shouted, "We need to leave." Voss stared at Cole one final time through smoke and falling embers. "This valley will bury you too, Brennan." Then he disappeared into darkness beyond the burning fields. Moments later, black SUVs roared away through the snow, gone, leaving Blackwater Farm burning behind them. Cole carried Atlas outside, just as the greenhouse roof collapsed entirely in a storm of sparks and smoke. Rose rushed toward them. "Oh my God!" Atlas coughed weakly in Cole's arms. The dog's breathing sounded rough now from smoke inhalation. Cole lowered him carefully onto a blanket near the farmhouse steps. "Stay with me." Atlas looked up at him tiredly, still trying to wag his tail, even now. Walter approached carrying the rescued evidence boxes. Lights flashed through the valley below. Police, federal agents, ambulances. Everything Margaret waited for finally arriving too late to save the farm from fire. Cole knelt beside Atlas while snow melted against his burned jacket. The old Malinois rested his head weakly against Cole's knee, alive, but barely. And as Blackwater Valley burned beneath the winter mountains, Cole Brennan realized something terrible and beautiful all at once. Margaret Hale had never expected to survive this fight. She only needed somebody strong enough to finish it. Snow drifted silently across the burned remains of Blackwater Farm. As dawn slowly rose over the Blue Ridge Mountains, the fire was finally out. Smoke still curled upward from the collapsed greenhouse beams, while frozen ash covered the flower fields like gray winter dust. Emergency vehicles lined the muddy road leading into the valley, their flashing lights fading beneath the pale morning sky. Cole Brennan sat on the farmhouse porch steps, wrapped in a heavy blanket, staring at Atlas. The old Belgian Malinois lay beside him on another blanket near the doorway, while a veterinarian from Asheville carefully adjusted oxygen tubing near the dog's muzzle. Atlas looked exhausted. One side of his fur was singed black from smoke and heat. Fresh bandages wrapped around his ribs and front leg. His breathing remained shallow but steady. Alive, barely. Cole rested one hand against the dog's neck. "You stubborn old bastard," he whispered softly. Atlas opened his eyes slightly at the sound of his voice. Tail thump, weak, but there. Cole let out a shaky breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Behind him, federal agents moved through the farmhouse carrying boxes of evidence recovered from the tunnels beneath the valley. Walter Grayson stood near the kitchen doorway, speaking quietly with two investigators, while Rose Bennett handed exhausted firefighters paper cups of coffee from giant metal thermoses. The valley looked wounded, but awake. For the first time in decades, people were no longer pretending nothing was wrong. A black SUV approached slowly through the mud. Cole stiffened instantly. But this vehicle carried government plates. A gray-haired woman in a federal jacket climbed out and approached the porch carefully. "Cole Brennan?" He nodded once. The woman removed her gloves slowly. "My name is Agent Rebecca Mercer, Department of Justice." Cole glanced toward Walter instinctively. The lawyer gave a small nod. "She's legitimate." Mercer looked toward the burned greenhouse. Margaret Hale collected enough evidence to open federal investigations across 3 states. Cole said nothing. The agent continued carefully. Illegal weapons transfers, corporate corruption, witness intimidation, missing military inventory. Her eyes shifted toward him. Crown Summit Holdings is finished. The words settled quietly over the porch. Finished. After all these years. Cole stared out toward the valley. Margaret never got to see this part. That realization hurt more than he expected. Mercer lowered her voice. Derek Voss disappeared overnight. But most of his network won't. Cole nodded slightly. That's usually how men like him survive. The agent studied him carefully. You were military, Navy. She glanced toward Atlas. And the dog? SEAL K9. Something softened briefly in her expression. He saved your life. Cole looked down at Atlas quietly. More than once. Hours passed slowly beneath the winter sky. By afternoon, the media trucks arrived outside Belridge Hollow. Then state investigators, then lawyers, then reporters. Questions flooded the valley like rising water after a storm. But Blackwater Farm remained strangely calm beneath it all. Frank Delancey sat repairing porch railings damaged during the fire, as though chaos around him barely existed. Rose organized meals inside the farmhouse kitchen for firefighters and deputies. Eli Turner carried salvaged boxes from the greenhouse ruins without being asked. And Atlas slept near the fireplace, while strangers quietly stopped to scratch behind his ears. Like he already belonged to the whole valley. Cole stood alone near the burned greenhouse just before sunset. The structure was gone, collapsed completely inward. Only blackened beams remained jutting upward against the snowy mountains. Margaret spent decades protecting this place, and in one night, fire nearly erased it. Footsteps crunched softly behind him. Walter Grayson approached holding a folder. You should see this. Cole took the folder silently. Inside rested legal paperwork transferring additional property rights surrounding Blackwater Farm. What is this? Walter smiled faintly. Margaret bought neighboring parcels quietly over the years. Cole blinked. She owned more land? Quite a bit more. Walter pointed toward the mountains surrounding the valley. She planned ahead. Cole laughed softly despite himself. That woman really never stopped fighting. Walter's expression grew quieter. No, she didn't. Snow drifted gently through the burned fields around them. Then Walter reached into the folder again. One more thing. He handed Cole another letter. Margaret's handwriting stopped him cold immediately. Cole opened it carefully. My dear Cole, if you are reading this, then Blackwater survived long enough for the truth to finally reach daylight. His throat tightened instantly. I know there will be damage, maybe terrible damage, but places can heal if people choose not to abandon them. Cole looked slowly across the ruined greenhouse. Margaret continued. The farm was never meant to make you rich. It was meant to remind you that life still grows after winter. Tears blurred the words slightly. Atlas limped slowly toward him through the snow and rested against his leg. Cole placed one hand gently on the dog's head while continuing. You and Atlas understand loyalty better than most people ever will. That loyalty may hurt you sometimes, but it will also save others. The mountains around Blackwater Valley glowed gold beneath the setting sun. I hope one day this place becomes something more than evidence and grief. I hope it becomes shelter. Shelter. The word lingered. Cole lowered the letter slowly. Then he looked toward the farmhouse, toward Rose helping Eli laugh quietly near the porch, toward Frank rebuilding broken railings, toward Atlas standing beside him, despite pain and exhaustion. Shelter. Months passed. Winter slowly released its grip on Blackwater Valley. Federal indictments rolled across news channels nationwide. Politicians resigned. Defense contractors vanished into investigations and lawsuits. Crown Summit Holdings collapsed beneath waves of criminal charges and seized assets. Derek Voss was eventually captured, trying to cross into Canada under a false identity. Belridge Hollow changed almost overnight. For the first time in decades, people stopped leaving. And at Blackwater Farm, something new began growing. Spring rain washed ash from the fields. Workers rebuilt the farmhouse roof. Volunteers repaired irrigation lines and greenhouse frames. Frank taught Eli welding inside the rebuilt barn, while Rose organized community dinners every Friday night. And Cole Brennan stayed, not because he had nowhere else to go anymore, because he finally found somewhere worth staying for. Part of the rebuilt property became something unexpected. A retreat center for struggling veterans and retired service dogs. Simple cabins near the tree line. Gardens, quiet places to sleep, quiet places to heal. Word spread slowly at first, then faster. Veterans arrived carrying invisible wounds they could never explain properly to families back home. Atlas greeted every one of them personally, always limping now. The injury to his leg never healed fully after the fire. But the old Malinois carried himself with quiet dignity, becoming something of a legend around Belridge Hollow. Children in town called him Sergeant Atlas. Cole never corrected them. One early morning in late spring, Cole walked alone through the rebuilt greenhouse, carrying a small wooden box. Sunrise painted the mountains gold beyond the valley, while dew glistened across rows of newly planted flowers. Atlas limped slowly beside him. Older now, grayer around the muzzle, but peaceful. Cole stopped near the center of the greenhouse where fresh soil waited beneath warm morning light. Inside the wooden box rested Margaret Hale's black rose seeds, the last surviving strain from the original farm. Cole knelt carefully in the soil. Atlas settled beside him with a tired sigh. Together they planted the roses in silence. Outside, the valley slowly woke beneath birdsong and mountain wind. Cole looked toward the sunrise filtering through greenhouse glass, then finally understood something Margaret had been trying to teach him all along. Some wounds never fully disappear. Some memories never stop hurting. But pain did not mean life stopped growing. He rested one hand gently against Atlas's scarred neck. The old dog closed his eyes peacefully. For years, Cole Brennan believed he was a broken soldier drifting through the ruins of his own life. But Margaret Hale saw something else. A protector, a survivor, a man still capable of building shelter from ashes. The black roses would bloom again, and so would he. If you believe some land is worth fighting for, type "stand" down in the comments. And if you've ever had a dog stay loyal through the hardest years of your life, tell us their name. Folks around here would love to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe if you enjoy stories about justice, second chances, and good people standing their ground when the world tries to push them out.